Hey everyone, we are happy to welcome you to today's Inside Look session with the Elephant Crisis Fund. As many of you know, the Elephant Crisis Fund is a joint initiative of Save the Elephants and the Wildlife Conservation Network. It was created to address the elephant conservation crisis by funding urgent actions across the globe. A shared vision between our founder and Save the Elephants, combined with an unexpected opportunity in 2013, launched what was to become one of the best and brightest initiatives for saving elephants. Since 2013, the Elephant Crisis Fund has granted over $31 million in 44 different countries, all in the name of elephant conservation. Today, we have joining with us Dr. Chris Thaulis, Director of the Elephant Crisis Fund and Director of Research at Save the Elephants, and Dr. Lucy King, the head of Human-Elephant Coexistence for Save the Elephants, and the Human-Elephant Conflict Program Manager for the Elephant Crisis Fund. They are both turning in from Panama at the moment, where they're at the CITES conservation of the parties where major conservation decisions are currently being made. Hopefully we don't have any Wi-Fi issues, but if we do, we appreciate your patience. I'm sure we'll be able to get them right back on. Chris has spent more than 30 years working with elephants around Africa and Asia, focusing predominantly on movements and distribution, human-elephant conflict, and park management. He has unique firsthand knowledge of the status of elephants across Africa and a perspective that has guided the trajectory of the fund over the last 9 years. Based in Tsavo, Kenya, Lucy's research on the use of honeybees as a natural deterrent for crop-raiding elephants has been a game changer. It's led to the incredibly innovative elephant deterrent methods. Last year, her team constructed a women's eco-enterprise center next to Tsavo National Park, bringing alternative income projects for women living in conflict with elephants. Today, they're going to be talking about the Human-Elephant Toolbox, an incredible resource that those living alongside elephants. It's one of the best resource guides that I've personally seen in a very long time, and I'm very excited to see its impact. Chris and Lucy, take it away.
Right. Good afternoon, evening, whatever it is where you are. We're speaking from the conference center in Panama at the, have I just unmuted myself?
No, it's fine.
Oh, fine. Okay. All right. The conference center in Panama, where we're attending the conference on the international trade in endangered species. Lots of discussions and decisions going on about the future of elephants and many other species. So far, I think it's fair to say on the elephant side, not a huge amount of note being decided, although there have been many tormented arguments lasting many hours, covering very small minutiae of points in the agenda. But we've still got another week to go, so we'll see what happens then. I think it's fair to say that as an organization, we're reasonably happy with the status quo, where there is no legal trade in ivory. And it looks, I think we're reasonably certain that that is set to continue. So when the Elephant Crisis Fund was set up, it was in response to a very severe crisis for elephants as a result of the illegal ivory trade. And one could say that the CITES ban on ivory had not been successful in the long term. Worked very effectively in 1990, stopping the first sort of post-colonial major crisis in elephant poaching for ivory. There was then a resurgence in roughly 2009, and that's the reason why the Elephant Crisis Fund was set up. A feeling that there was a need to mobilize resources to give money much more quickly and in a much more flexible way than had been possible through other approaches. And as mentioned, there have been many grants given to a large number of different organizations in different countries. And I think we can say that along with our partners, along with the vast amounts of additional money that's been given through other routes, there has been a huge and perhaps unheralded success in terms of getting the ivory, demand for ivory, ivory trafficking, and poaching under control. In say 5 years ago, I was asked to go through a list of countries and say, what was the primary threat to elephants in each of those African countries? And I think that I came up with only one country where poaching for ivory was not the principal threat to elephants. I don't think that is the situation today. I would say there's possibly one country where poaching for ivory is still the major threat, but virtually every other country, it is not the most significant threat. I think that we and you as donors to the Elephant Crisis Fund can take credit for a great deal of this. No, not a great deal. We can take credit for our part. And there have been some amazing successes that the partners in the Elephant Crisis Fund have created. I think one of the absolutely key things is the fact that the Chinese government has come down strongly against the ivory trade. It banned it, domestic sale of ivory in 2018, and they kept a very strong control of the sale of ivory. They made sure that people were not trading ivory openly. There is still a small amount of ivory trade that is taking place into China, but it's not that significant as far as we can tell. The other thing the Chinese government did, which was quite extraordinary, was the anti-trafficking bureau of the customs, anti-trafficking police of the customs department in China, stood up at a meeting I was at in 2018, said, we want to work with the outside world. We want to solve this problem. We thought that was a bit of PR. It turned out it was not. It was absolutely genuine. They really started cooperating even with NGOs, who the Chinese government is obviously not familiar with dealing with NGOs in their own country. And as a result of information provided by some of our ECF partners, the Chinese were able to prosecute and imprison significant number of high-level traffickers based in China. They've also carried out their own investigations using highly advanced techniques of surveillance, phone analysis, and so on, and actually broken up a number of trafficking rings entirely off their own resources. So that's been a remarkable success. ECF partners have also been successful in bringing down some of the major trafficking networks, taking ivory from Africa to Asia. As you probably read, there's 5 major suspects who were indicted several years ago in Southern District of New York. They are all now in New York. In the end, the last 2, thanks to $1 million rewards put out by the State Department. The first one of those has been convicted. 3 of the others have pled guilty and will be sentenced. Another person is from Congo, was arrested, came from the Congo, was arrested in Washington State. He's now pled guilty and is awaiting sentencing. Again, funded. The initial investigations were funded through partners of the Elephant Crisis Fund. And the same is happening in other places. The message is getting out. Trading in ivory is no longer a risk-free activity. And although it's sad for some of the other species, we're seeing that in mixed shipments of ivory, pangolin, scales, and rhino, ivory is now much less important than it was in those mixed shipments. And we're hearing from undercover sources that people are really scared to trade in ivory because it's too dangerous. And lastly, a number of our partners, particularly in large and difficult areas in the rainforest in Central and West Africa, have been able to apply the lessons that were learned on protected area management in East Africa about how to do really smart law enforcement anti-poaching. And so there's many places which were really overtaken by heavily armed poachers 5, 6, 7 years ago that are now almost free of poaching. I think Garamba in Northeast Democratic Republic of Congo is a perfect example, where you were having over 100 elephants killed a year out of a population that was not, between 1 and 2,000. Now, I think they've lost 5 elephants in the last 3 years. So the situation has completely transformed. And this has been seen in a number of other sites that our partners have protected. So one might say, that's fine. Should we close up fund because we succeeded? No, we shouldn't do that. I think there are several reasons. First reason is that the ivory crisis may come back again. And it's because it's low at the moment doesn't mean it will always stay the same. So it is important to keep tabs on things, make sure that particularly these trafficking networks are kept down and they can't rear their heads again. The other thing is that there are large areas which are places that are elephant strongholds where poaching is no longer a problem. But unless really urgent action is taken to protect those areas of habitat, again, particularly in Central Africa, the elephants will never be able to recover. So it's very important to provide support to organizations that are safeguarding elephant habitat to give them a chance for recovery. And the last issue, which is what we're going to dedicate the rest of this talk to, is human-elephant conflict and coexistence. It has been a problem of elephants and humans occupying the same space, wanting the same resources. Problem is that it has become much worse in the last few years since the poaching reduced, and it has become the single biggest threat to elephant conservation survival, apart from the loss of habitat. So we need to change the focus of the Elephant Crisis Fund. We're remaining committed to protection of elephants and keeping the ivory trade under control. We're committed to helping people safeguard areas for elephants, but we're also committed to trying to reduce and mitigate the effects of conflict between humans and elephants and to create human-elephant coexistence. And that is what Lucy is the expert on, and so I will hand over to her.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Chris, for that introduction. It is a great honor to speak to you today from the conference hall in Panama City at the Conference of the Parties. There's 3,000 people here discussing the future of many species, including elephants. We've already spent 3 days discussing the future of elephants and the most incredible technical discussions. And so much of the debate is talking about elephants and their future. Landscapes like this beautiful image here are not necessarily the image that we're seeing all over Africa now. We are losing land and habitat quite rapidly. And the rise of human-elephant conflict is of great concern to many parties, but particularly to Save the Elephants. We at Save the Elephants have a growing human-elephant coexistence program. I have been running that program since 2009 with Save the Elephants, and I joined Save the Elephants in 2006. Only 2 years ago did I join the Elephant Crisis Fund as the recognition that coexistence and conflict is our next massive challenge. It's been an incredible whirlwind of 2 years working with the ECF, and I just want to tell you some of the work we've achieved in those 2 years. So this image here is actually the reality of what we're dealing with now in Africa. When we talk about communities on the borders of national parks, we're not talking about just a few huts or a few houses. We're talking about very large scale communities growing and developing on the edge of our biggest, most important elephant habitats. This is exactly the type of scenario that we're seeing, forest and savanna, hard next to crops, and then with communities, houses and development building behind. And you can imagine without very strong electric fences that it doesn't take much for elephants to walk out of their natural habitat and enter both farms and then a short step later into houses as well. And this is the kind of scenario, as elephants are becoming bolder, they are re-exploring part of their land that is now dominated by human habitat and houses. So we're seeing communities sort of shocked again at seeing elephants walking back into their land. Now, this image came from one of our partners in Malawi. This is a highly risky situation to have a family surrounded by community members on both sides, talking and shouting and throwing things. And we're really, really concerned that the escalation is growing fast. Elephants do not want to kill people. They are herbivores. They do not eat meat. So there's no reason for them to kill people. But what we're seeing is that there's such a conflict rising that elephants can quickly turn around and kill someone to try and get out of the situation. So this conflict is escalating very fast. This is one of our elephants that we knew well in Kenya called Tim. We collared him because he was a tomato-loving elephant. And he would come out of the park around Amboseli and just hang out in the tomato fields. We put a collar on him, and many partners were involved in monitoring him with partners Big Life, Ampersand Trust for Elephants, KWS, and they monitored Tim, this individual. And of course, it's not just one big bull that's crop raiding. He's teaching many more of his friends and colleagues how to crop raid, and for their taste of tomatoes has escalated. So Tim actually died recently. He was shot many times in the bottom. But he did succumb quite recently, and his magnificent tusks are actually being preserved into the museums of Kenya. Elephants like this are no joke. If you have an elephant of this size coming into the small hut that you can see behind, you're in real trouble. And for farmers like Wabongo here, for an elephant to come into his small shamba or his small farm, and he can destroy food and trees in a matter of hours. This is an entire orchard of trees that was ripped up by an elephant. And this farmer, who's living in a very, very simple house, was at absolute odds and loss as what to do next. And it's these farmers like Wabonga who we're working with particularly to find a way that they can live with elephants. And it's a huge challenge working with communities who are on the absolutely bottom end of the lower socioeconomic scale. Some of the conflict is with female farmers who are also in a very dire situation. They don't necessarily feel confident about coming out in the dark with flashlights to scare elephants away. And every single loss of a plant can be really catastrophic. These photos were taken quite recently around Lake Jipe on the border of Tsavo West National Park between Kenya and Tanzania. And we are regularly seeing large bull elephants walking very confidently between houses in villages with kids going to school. And it's this interesting behavior that we're seeing as the poaching has reduced, the elephants are becoming more and more confident in re-exploring previous areas that they otherwise would have stayed away from in fear of their lives. So the risk of coming into the communities has reduced somewhat because of the reduced threat from active poaching. So this is an interesting shift that we're seeing. Now, this is another situation where elephants came and ripped this roof off the house in a very poor house in Samburu, reached inside and took out all of the beams that this community were living off. And these situations are very serious. That house can be knocked over in 2 seconds by an elephant. What we've done is Save the Elephants. We have a rapid response team that goes straight out and talks to the community, takes the heat out of the situation, and tries to come up with an instant solution to try and help in that scenario to stop these communities going and killing that elephant immediately. This is actually Wilson, my PhD assistant back in the day, and now he's been redeployed by Save the Elephants as a coexistence mediator to help these individual families. So in this case, our team went out and they replaced the food that the elephant had eaten. This is David Dablan, you might recognize him. He's just been an incredible recipient of a nomination for the Tusk Award. We really were delighted with him. Now, David Dablan can't go out to every single household in northern Kenya and give them food in replacement. So this is not a sustainable long-term solution. What we're doing at the moment is just trying to take the heat out of the situation by helping families that are really desperate. They really can't afford to lose their last bag of food, particularly with the drought that we're seeing in northern Kenya. So this isn't a long-term solution, but it is a way to reach out to people and to talk to them and to start discussing how else they could live with elephants. So what we're doing here in CITES and for the last few years is we have been developing a new book, a new map, a new toolbox. We're calling it the Human Elephant Coexistence Toolbox, and it is advice and actions and tools to reduce conflict with elephants. It is a technical manual for trainers and community leaders. And we have been working on this for the last almost 3 years now with an amazing team from Kenya, an all-women team based in Nairobi. My co-colleagues are Naya Raja, Meha Kuma, and Nicola Heath, who is our extraordinary illustrator, all of us based in Kenya. And so this is a website platform where you can go online and you can download the entire toolbox. It's split into different chapters, and you can go in and access all of the tools, which I'm going to show to you, from that website. So feel welcome to go and have a look at it. And although this website is critical because we want to reach many, many parts of the world, it's also a book because we need a physical copy. And the book at the moment is 162 pages of methods and ideas. The book is critical. Even though we're having to print off many copies of this, we have to be able to take it into the field. Like this image here, Chris and I just came back from Chebra Chachura National Park in Ethiopia. confronting some extreme conflict in 3 villages to the north of the park. And we sat here with the wardens and the community leaders, and we talked them through the toolbox. And we're able to leave those copies behind, and they can spend time studying it. We've also handed them out in Kenya. We've done an extensive program of testing the toolbox and handing it to individuals to get feedback. That feedback has been worked into the book, and the document we have now is being shared globally. I'm just showing this picture. This was from yesterday. We're here in CITES. I was able to present it to the new Cabinet Secretary of Kenya from the Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Culture, and 2 of our very, very senior governors in Kenya of Narok County, who are home to the Masai Mara. So this physical book is very important, although it is available on the website for people to access from all over the world. So for example, this family who've had their house ripped off, how do they use this toolbox? Like, how does it work? Well, what you do is you go back into the book, and inside the contents page, there's just 7 sections of all the different ways you can live with elephants. This can be a little overwhelming. You have to read through all the different chapters. There's so much information here. So we've provided a tool guide which helps you go through, and it literally says, what problem do you have with elephants? This is how a decision guide works. And you go, are they a threat to your farm or house? Are they a threat to your school or compound? Are they a threat to your water tanks or pipes, or a threat to your trees? And in this case, we might say that that was a threat to someone's farm or house. And then you look to the right and it says, do you have a low budget or do you have a higher budget? Now, only you can know what a lower budget is. Most of our communities are on the far end of a low budget, but they might have more time, and they're able to physically prepare and work some mitigation methods. Other people like national parks or private game reserves might have a higher budget, but they have less time. So in this situation for that family, we would say that they might have a little bit of a budget because we're helping them, and a safe food storage is something that they would need because that elephant ripped the roof off their house. So this would be how you would find out how do you access the tool that's relevant to your particular problem. So in this situation, I'm just showing you an example of the safe food storage. This is how the toolbox looks. Each page is highly, highly illustrated. And the idea is that you can look through and be given a step-by-step guide of how to develop this particular tool to look after your food. So here you can see you have to get your 3 bags of cement, your bricks, your wheelbarrow of stones, and your wheelbarrow of river sand, and then this tells you how to build it. And each of these sections, each of these chapters has several pages. It's beautifully illustrated, and we've been able to translate this into many languages as well, because we can remove the text layer from the image layer and just replace a different text layer on top. So here is an image of our ECF partners using one of these tools in South Luangwa. We have given a grant and invested in Conservation South Luangwa, and they are building these around the outside of the national park, inside the villages, to help secure food for these communities. Another example of this food storage was in Serengeti. I took this photo just a few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago now, with our partners, Frankfurt Zoological Society, with this lady who had had her grain store knocked over many, many times by elephants. And we were able to fund FZS to put in 14 of these along the front line of the farms. And here you can see her grain store on the right-hand side and the traditional grain store on the left-hand side, which could be knocked over by an elephant in 2 seconds. When we went in there just to have a look at the grain that she was storing in there, the chickens were sitting in the grain. There were spiders and cobwebs. And of course, it's very unhygienic. There's nothing stopping anything walking in there and taking the grain. And of course, an elephant can walk in as well. So these new grain stores on the right-hand side, they cost a few $100s to make, and they hold 2 tons of grain. So that will hold a family for a post-harvest season very comfortably. There's some really simple tools in here, like night guarding. Many of our communities don't have much money, so these simple tools of how to deter elephants with such methods such as chilies and air guns and Roman candles and torches. We've invested multiple community projects with these toolboxes. This is again the FZS project in Serengeti. All of these elephant shepherds are using these toolboxes now. We've invested about $50,000 only over 2 years to support many, many projects with these very low cost methods to keep elephants away. And you'll see that big bag of chili on the right-hand side. Elephants really hate chili. So we have 9 pages of how you can use chilies to keep elephants out of your farm. The chili is releases but as everyone knows, chilies, they hurt you if it goes up your nose or in your eyes. It's no different for elephants, except they have much bigger eyes and much bigger noses. So they have a really adverse reaction to chili going up their nose, up their trunk. And so there's all sorts of methods of how you can crush chilies, put them around your farm, push them into chili smoke briquettes. You can even put them into condoms, tie up the end with a cracker, light the cracker and throw it, and it bangs and chili goes off. And these are very negative conditioning tools that elephants don't like, but it doesn't hurt them, and they will become deterred because they're not comfortable being around chili. Here's an example of some of the investments we've made through the ECF with our very key project partner in Tanzania, PAMS. They have now actually 70 communities across north, central and southern Tanzania, where they've been helping communities with chili fences, and they soak these rags in oil, and the oil is soaked with crushed chilies, which you can see on the ground there. They hang them up, very, very cheap. And as the elephants try and push through out of the bush into the farms, those chili rags hit the face of the elephant, and the elephant rears and just stays away. So of course the elephant could push through that, but it's not a physical barrier, it's an olfactory barrier, and it's stopping elephants from passing through. And as you go back to the toolbox, you can see the step-by-step process. So if you want to make one of those chili rope fences, you can look at the guide, and even if your English is not great or your Swahili is not great, it gives you a step-by-step guide as to how to do it. And so for places like this in Central Africa, in the Congo, Chris has been funding Odzala Kuku with ECF investments since around 2014, I believe, a long-term investment in this very critical forest elephant habitat. Now, a lot of these mitigation tools have never been tried in forest elephant habitats. They are much more difficult to get into. We don't have as many partners, but these forest elephants are listed as critically endangered. So every single individual counts, their habitats count, and we have to see if some of our methods from East and Southern Africa from the savanna elephants can be used to protect forest elephants. So we're partnering with our colleagues there, African Parks, who are embedded in this very complex but beautiful national park in Congo, to trial chili fences for forest elephants. Now they've come up with their own method, and they're training community members to trial this, to keep elephants in the forest safely and to keep the community members safe. So we're very excited. And as a scientist, I find this interesting. You know, is it working? The forest elephant is a different species to the savanna elephant. Is it going to work as well? Or can we learn something from observing how forest elephants react that we can take back to the savanna elephants in Kenya and South Africa and Southern Africa, and see if we can improve methods there? So it's a really positive cycle, feedback cycle. On the extreme end of a tropical forest is our colleagues in Botswana, Elephants for Africa. And we've invested with them to build chili stores where they can store their chilies safely. And they have built a lot of nurseries for farmers to grow their own chili plants across the community. So we have actually supported, just in 2 years, 119 villages have been supported with chili projects. 180 kilometers of chili fences have been built, not all in one row, across many sites. 150 kilometers extra of chili fences have been maintained by our funding. And 19.9 tons of chili have been harvested. Actually, that's just gone up. I think we had another 5 tons that came through last week. So there's a lot of chilies being harvested. And of course, there's great potential there for chili products to be made from the excess, which is really exciting. Some of the excess of chilies goes into this method, which is called organic elephant repellent. This is a method invented in Uganda with communities there, with Wild Aid as an organization that's been supporting this development. And it's a concoction, a really noxious concoction of chilies, elephant dung, cow dung, rotten eggs, oil. You mix it all together and you let it ferment for about 4 weeks. You can even put garlic and onions in there. It's really disgusting, to be honest. And when you open it after 4 weeks, it smells so appalling, but it's unbelievably cheap to make. And one container of this can be put around in bottles or sprayed on the crops, and it can get you through a harvest season, or when the crops are close to harvest. And the estimate is around $30 an acre. And you only have to make a couple of batches of it for your acre. So it's working well. If you're interested in this method, do contact Wild Aid. They're coming up with the latest ingredients list at the moment. This method's particularly easy for women to do. They find this a very easy project to engage with. A lot of these materials are locally available. They can plant them and harvest them locally. They can make the noxious materials. They can put it in a bag, leave it for a few weeks. And we're funding quite a few projects, real local-based community projects, including the Southern Tanzania Elephant Project. And here it is, hung up in bottles around the outside of a farm with just one piece of wire. So an elephant could easily walk through that wire, but the point is this is a really novel, olfactory, super cheap method to keep elephants out. And it's lovely to see some camera trap images coming up where the elephants have just walked up to the farm and then just stopped. Not because there's anything physical there, but because there's this olfactory psychological barrier. They don't like the smell. They don't know what it means. And of course, if it's backed up with other methods such as bright lights and maybe some barking dogs or some chilies going off, this keeps the elephants out without harming the elephants in any way. And we're supporting projects like this around Africa, including South Luangwa, where we have a really great project with the Conservation South Luangwa team. One of my favorites, this is a design we came up with on my project in Sagala in Savo. We designed this, we put together the whole instruction sheet, and now we're seeing these lovely watchtowers pop up across Africa. This is a watchtower that was built on our design in Yankari National Park in Nigeria. Now, the idea of these watchtowers is a very visual community empowerment method for communities to feel like they are in charge of their own situation. They can go up the tower whenever they want. They can see the elephants approaching. They can phone each other from the top of the watchtower and say, "Hey, Fred, the elephants are coming to your farm. We can see it. Just steer clear. He's coming around the outside of your baobab." And the idea is that the rangers and the community members can manage this on their own. The other advantage of this is a safe place. So if these are on the front line of where the conflict's happening, the farmers, the rangers, who are also in a vulnerable situation trying to scare elephants away, can access a safe spot and go up these watchtowers. We have encouraged them to be made of metal rather than wood. Wood can be eaten by termites. They can be a bit cheaper, but the metal is a much more permanent solution. We've invested around 3,500 to 4,000 per watchtower, but they are a really good long-term solution. So relatively cheap for the benefit of many, many members in one village. And of course, beehive fences, we had to do a sheet on this. This is the method that I helped invent with Save the Elephants during my PhD. We're really thrilled that this method has been proven to be very successful. We hang beehives around the outside of farms, and it's interlinked with a simple piece of wire. And we've discovered that elephants are scared of bees. So as the elephants approach these beehive fences, if they try and go into the farm, they will knock the wire that connects all the beehives. The bees will come out and the elephants will run away. And the advantage of this is that the beehives are hanging above the farm. It doesn't take up any space of the farm, but it provides another business for the farmers in terms of honey being produced and wax being produced as an alternative livelihood. And of course, the pollination services of the bees and the beehive fences is an intangible, valuable benefit. Very hard to measure how much production is improved because of beehives, but we know from many studies that having honeybees around your crops that have particular flowers are going to benefit from a yield boost. We're thrilled that beehive fences are now in 88 sites around Africa and Asia and 23 countries, and we're seeing that number grow and grow. We estimate around 12,000 beehives are now being used globally as particular elephant deterrents. Although we think that's on the lower side of the reality as more countries come on board and use beehives. And of course, we're really delighted that this is supporting the honeybee populations across many countries too. So we've supported beehive fences with several of our Elephant Crisis Fund partners, including the Wildlife Action Group in Malawi. It was a really lovely picture of them all walking their beehives to build their new beehive fence, which had 90 hives. And this is a really good project that traditional women can get involved in. Beekeeping per se is not novel. It's just about moving those beehives into a structure around a hard boundary where they don't want elephants to come into the village. And ladies like this, I don't know, I haven't met them. I don't know what language they speak or their dialect. I don't even know if they're literate. So what we wanted to do with the toolbox was to create detailed sheets such as this one, where you can go in and really see visually how to hang the beehive without necessarily having to read the English. or the Swahili, whichever language that you receive your toolbox in. So I hope you can see that this is a very technical step-by-step guide toolbox that we've spent a lot of time thinking through to try and take out the necessity for being totally literate. And we're thrilled that these beehive fences are now popping up everywhere. This is our partner in Tanzania, Wild Survivors, who've built many beehive fences. In fact, their total distance now is around 4.5 kilometers of beehive fences, and it's stopping elephants coming out of the Ngorongoro crater area, a really fabulous, famous part of Tanzania. But they were coming out of that highly important zone and coming and crop raiding. So these beehive fences have taken the edge off the conflict. The communities are harvesting honey, and we're really thrilled that we've been able to provide a toolbox to help people improve their beekeeping and to look after their bees. So we've funded beehives and beehive fences through the Elephant Crisis Fund, including those in Congo with forest elephants, which is wonderful. And I hope you agree, there's some lovely drawings of how you can make lip balms from your wax that you collect from your honey, and it gives you a step-by-step guide. And we've also funded and helped fund a honey processing room in Tanzania with this lovely Nari women's beekeeping group. So we're seeing a real kind of knock-on effect of some of these tools that are providing alternative livelihoods. We also really are supporting non-palatable crops. So we're encouraging farmers to not grow things that elephants want to eat. If you live right next to a national park, don't grow maize and beans because you're going to be crop raided. So think differently, think about what other crops you can grow. Sunflowers is the one we've discovered is really positive. Elephants don't eat sunflowers, so they provide seeds and oil and all these benefits, and they can be converted into soaps and lip balms and everything as well. So there's all these different crops that we found and discovered: ginger, eggplant, okra, chilies, black pepper, turmeric, garlic. They're all very good cash crops. Some of them are edible. So we're hoping that farmers literally on the front line stop growing maize and beans and just think of growing a crop they can sell instead, and they can buy maize and beans with the sale of their food. It's a simple idea, but it's taking a lot of change to get people to adopt this. One such project is EcoExist in Botswana, very good colleagues of ours. They're growing millet in the Okavango Delta. Elephants can eat millet, but it's not their favorite food. And the millet is being protected now by cluster solar fences that we've been funding to help them ensure that their crop is well produced. And then they're selling it commercially to a craft brewery in Maun. So this is sort of elephant-friendly craft beer, which is being made by a legitimate crop that the farmers are now able to grow successfully. And this craft beer is getting all sorts of awards in Botswana, and it's becoming a bit of a national treasure for the whole country. So amazing work by EcoExist. So we've been funding the cluster fences. They're solar fences that go around these millet farms to make sure that elephants don't touch that particular crop. And these cluster fences are protecting corridors that pass between these farming areas. So the corridors are now not touched by any crops at all. No one puts their house there, and the farming area has been defined. So it's very important that we think about these larger scale movements of elephants through communities. So also with EcoExist, we're funding collars to help them understand how the elephants are moving between these vast areas of Botswana. As I'm sure you know, Botswana has the largest elephant population in the world. Between 130, 140,000 elephants are living with approximately 2 million people. So there's a huge area for elephants, but there's also a rise in human-elephant conflict as the two overlap. So we're helping with a large mapping program for them to help identify where the corridors are. And this has been done largely by attaching collars onto elephants, which we're funding. And this is really important, vital data. If we don't understand where the elephants are, how can we understand where to implement these methods to promote harmony? They are using the Save the Elephants Wild Tracks app that we developed in partnership with Vulcan. And this gives you real-time data on where our elephants are every single hour of the day. Incredibly useful tool.
Committee 1 is about to resume its afternoon session.
I'm sorry. Sorry, guys, we're right live in the conference here. Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry about that. Committee 1's about to reconvene. So yeah, these lovely pictures from Elephant EcoExist is exactly who we want to support, and they are critical partners for us in one of the largest elephant populations in the world. And again, as we network with the Elephant Crisis Fund our partners are now partnering with each other, which we love. So our network is providing this kind of momentum of science and support and coexistence. And EcoExist are working now with Connected Conservation based in Victoria Falls, and they are going to be helping each other on how to use the mapping skills learned in Botswana to map the Victoria Falls with this conflict mapping program. So we're also funding collars in the whole wider Victoria Falls area of Zimbabwe. And it's really exciting, this project. You can hardly believe there's elephants just walking around this very high tourism area. There's a lot of people living here, and they walk between Victoria Falls and Kwangi, which is a very large population. So having collars on is really key, and they're very expensive. A collar costs around $10,000 for the entire collaring experience and to monitor that collar afterwards. So we're really grateful to those of you who have funded elephant collars. It's not small money, but my goodness, it is absolute gold data when it comes in. So thank you for considering funding these for us. We have many partners who need them, and we will be thrilled if any of you would like to support some elephant collars for our network of partners. Another corridor that we're funding is the one between the Selous and the Usambara Mountains. And it's really stunning. We got this photo just a few days ago of the community project officers actually physically mapping a 12-kilometer corridor, which is going to connect these two elephant areas. So this is all really important funding that we're doing. We supported vehicles, motorbikes, even a canoe, some bikes. But I have to say, these vehicles, they cost between $50,000 and $60,000. They are absolutely essential for some of these tough remote places that we go to. And we could honestly we could do with another 50 more vehicles like this for the project partners that we have. So thank you to those of you on the call who have funded some of these vehicles for our teams. It's really incredibly valuable. And we're really thrilled with the amount of investment we've put into local capacity development, including these Nari women beekeepers group in Tanzania, who are just the most jolly, amazing women. We were just there with them in July, and they showed us their new apiary and honey processing room and the beehive fences that they've been working on. And 40 women are now providing income for their 40 families. So it's a huge knock-on effect, these community projects. So yeah, over the last 2 years of running human-elephant coexistence grants with Save the Elephants and the Wildlife Conservation Network, we have, just on this coexistence work, we have distributed $2.1 million. We've supported 49 distinct projects, and these are across 16 countries across the African elephant range states. We're very proud of the progress we've made, the pace of it. We've tried to be fast and rapid and nimble. We have a good granting process, but we also don't want to take too long in giving out grants. We really see this as a crisis. One thing we don't have is time. So we need to act fast and now while the land is still there, while the elephants are still there, and make sure that we're putting these mitigation and thoughtful interventions in before it's too late. And so, one of the reasons is we're here in CITES. We took this photo this morning. It's a bit cheesy, but we're standing in CITES, and we are here to present the toolbox to all the African range states. It's quite overwhelming. There are hundreds and hundreds of countries here, and we have physically printed off some of the toolboxes in French and Swahili, which has now been produced. If you go online, you can download the French and Swahili toolboxes, and we're here handing them out to different colleagues with my friends here. Dr. Festus Sawagi, Chris is in the center, and Meha Kuma, one of my co-authors from Nairobi, is on the right-hand side. And there's our stand. Again, a rather cheesy photo taken this morning, but our stand is covered in the toolbox, and we've had so many people coming to see it. We've had our friends from Nigeria and Sierra Leone and Guinea and West Africa, South Africa, Namibia, Botswana. We're handing it out to all of these colleagues. And we're really thrilled that we're actually physically here to take the heat out of the debate of ivory trade and selling elephants to justify their existence. So thank you very much, everyone, for listening. And I really hope you enjoyed that presentation. And if you'd like to support our work, we honestly, every single penny counts, but we need a lot of them. And there's a lot of work to be done. So if you would like to donate, the details are here. And of course, just email me if you want any more questions, and you're more than welcome to contact me, and I can send you the book of the toolbox. It's in a PDF, so we can just email you the whole book. And if you're a French speaker, you can have the French or Swahili version too. So thank you so much, everyone, and over to questions.
Thank you so much, Lucy and Chris. It's quite impressive to learn that something as small as bees and chili peppers can deter animals as large as elephants. Love seeing some of the chats that have been coming in while you were presenting. We have guests from all over the world. We've got folks from the Congo and Nigeria and throughout North America. So a really interesting audience for us to be able to connect with today and for you to be able to share the information that you've been working on and in your fantastic work. We've had some great questions come in. I wanted to start first. There was a question from Shifra. Is there a process in place where communities can report back on their experience with the toolkit and so that the toolbox can be updated as new evidence builds?
Yeah, thank you, Shifra. And thanks for that question. We are really emphasizing that. So every time we're emailing it out, we are encouraging people to tell us, is it working for you? The examples that we've put in, we know that they have worked for either ourselves or for our partners that we've talked to, but we are more than aware that not every method will work everywhere. So it's critical that if beehive fences are working brilliantly in Kenya, but they're not working so well in, I don't know, Equatorial Guinea, that we can put that in the toolbox and say, listen, for these reasons, this isn't working in that environment. For example, beehive fences don't work that well where there's a lot of rain. That's just an example, or where it's extremely hot. Because the wax melts over 40 degrees Celsius. So we're not saying there's one perfect method for everywhere, but if the more feedback we get from our colleagues and partners, the better it can be. So absolutely, there's a feedback cycle. And we hope that by having the toolbox free and accessible in different languages, we will get the best feedback from all our elephant colleagues, particularly from the French-speaking African elephant countries where we're not able to get there personally or do our own research there. But we're very much reliant on the network of both the Elephant Crisis Fund and the African Elephant Specialist Group, of which we're both members through IUCN.
Awesome, thank you so much. There's you mentioned different habitats that you're doing work in. There's a question for Timothy on whether or not the toolbox is being used in other regions, such as with Asian elephants.
Yeah, thanks very much. And yes, we have designed this toolbox for Africa because we're African elephant experts. We both and all of us have more than some sympathy for the Asian elephant situation. There's only 13 countries with Asian elephants, and we're not sure of the total figures, around 50,000. They're extremely critically endangered. Some of the methods we have introduced here have come from Sri Lanka and India, where I've spent quite a bit of time. And so we know that they are working for African elephants as well. And we really encourage Asian elephant colleagues to try the methods that we're showing. We haven't been able to redo the whole toolbox using Asian elephants, but I hope that in time that would be something that we could partner with someone. And again, any ideas we've missed that are being used extensively in Asia, we would love to hear from you, and so we can showcase it. I think we all need to work together. There's no reason for us not to talk, not to share ideas, and to see what works for African elephants might work for Asian elephants, but there's no assumptions that they will. Again, they are a different species to African elephants, as are forest elephants. So we have to just be open-minded about not everything will work everywhere.
You mentioned a little bit the numbers for Asian elephant populations, and you might have mentioned it earlier and I just missed it, but could you give us a current number for what the estimates are for African elephants? And then and that's a question from Samantha. And then there was a similar question from David on, is there an estimate on how many elephants have been lost specifically from human-wildlife conflict?
Right. Well, I'm working on the update to the forest elephant status report. Since our last update, which broadly showed, and it gets complicated because you cannot count elephants exactly, and particularly forest elephants. The last update we did in 2016, we had a figure of estimates of sort of proper surveys of about 415,000 elephants, but we were pretty certain that there were probably another 100,000 elephants or so. So our sort of broad best guess would probably be the order of 550,000 elephants. We're just completing now they're separated into forest and savanna elephants. We're just completing the forest elephant status report. There are actually now slightly more forest elephants than we had thought because of new surveys being done in Gabon, which is where the majority of forest elephants, I think more than 50% of all known forest elephants occur. And so that's bringing the numbers up to about 130,000 reasonably certain, plus another 20 to 30,000. So the actual estimate overall is probably up by about 20,000, but that's because of better counting. And often, counting techniques generally undercount elephant numbers. But that increase, which is largely because of an uptick in the calculated number for Gabon, conceals losses in other places like in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and particularly worrying the biggest population in West Africa, between Benin, Burkina Faso, and Niger, where jihadists have taken over pretty much all the protected areas in the southeast of Burkina Faso. It looks as if we may have lost up to 5,000 elephants there in the last 10 years. But people are unable to get in there. The survey aircraft have to fly high to avoid being shot down. So we're still not 100% certain of the numbers. The number of elephants that have been lost to human-elephant conflict, again, it's a really tough one because whereas an elephant that is poached, you're pretty certain about it because the poachers will make sure that they get to the dead elephant and they hack out the tusks. So you find a carcass with the tusks removed, with axe marks, pretty certainly that's a poached elephant. Elephants that are killed in conflict often are only wounded because the main objective is to scare them off. So a lethal injury to an elephant may not cause immediate death. And so we're finding a lot of elephants that are dead. We suspect conflict, but it's often difficult to identify a cause of death. And one sort of slightly bizarre reason for that is you shoot an elephant in the leg, it falls over, it dies. It's a huge carcass. You just can't do a full post-mortem to find a single bullet in an elephant. So you can't be certain how many elephants have died from conflict. And although there is a sort of a sample around Africa called the Monitoring the Illegal Killing of Elephants program, the estimates for animals that have died in conflict are really uncertain. In Samburu, where Save the Elephants works, at the peak of poaching, we were losing, I think the highest year was just over 200 dead elephants being poached. Last year, we lost 70 elephants as a bare minimum. The ones we knew for certain had been killed in conflict. There were probably at least another 50 killed in conflict, which brings it almost up to the level of the peak of the poaching. And that is really extraordinary. Only a single elephant in our study area last year had its tusks removed. Every single other one was killed and the tusks were left in place. So although at a continental level, killing in conflict is probably not at the same level that it was during the poaching crisis, because not as many places have as many illegal automatic weapons as Samburu does. It is approaching the same level of criticality.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's nice to know that there's some positive news coming out with some of the population numbers, although albeit not everywhere. You guys have spoken a lot to human-elephant conflict and avoidance techniques. There's a question from Jocelyn on if there's work being done to reduce habitat loss from human expansion. And then kind of along those similar lines, a question from Paula on whether buffer zones are being discussed or implemented between animal and human habitats.
So can you just say what was the last question?
The second one was whether buffer zones were being discussed or implemented between animal and human habitats.
Yeah, tricky one. Yeah, obviously protecting habitat is really important, and that's a major part of the continued work of the Elephant Crisis Fund, trying to protect core elephant ranges. Buffer zones, interesting. It's an interesting thing. Buffer zones were tremendously popular back in the sort of 80s and 90s as part of this idea of biosphere reserves. And they're very difficult to operate in practice. I mean, the idea then was that you would have human settlements outside the buffer zones, and then the buffer zones themselves would allow a certain amount of human activity, but not permanent settlement. Still being tried actually on Zala National Park. There's a 5-kilometer buffer zone, and people are now farming inside that buffer zone, and it's probably one of the main places where conflict occurs. And I think that is generally the case, that buffer zones usually result in loss of protected area and a new zone of conflict within the protected area. So great idea in practice. Practical implementation has been a lot trickier.
Thank you. A really interesting question from Ray. He was wondering, I'm just going to read it verbatim because it's easier. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on making it easier to connect elephant conservation efforts with volunteer software developers. who are passionate about elephants. It sounds like he's done some work in the space before, but found that it was really difficult to make those connections in the first place. And while he's not volunteering to take on more, he's wondering if maybe there's a way to reach a larger audience for mobilizing more technological solutions.
Yes. Yes, there's I mean, it's an absolutely enormous question. And yes, we have worked with some volunteer software developers. I think one of the problems is that anything involving software development turns into a monster project. And you know, even so we're doing a lot of work with the Paul Allen estate, the Vulcan, Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence, and so on. And there's things like the African Elephant Database have support from them. We're doing stuff in terms of an analysis of radio tracking data and so on. And even with a full-time, huge, you know, big organization providing full-time resources and staff, we usually find that the software developers, even though they're paid and are working full-time, just dealing with setting up the software in the first place and then doing the checking for errors and maintaining it is an enormous task. And I think it's quite difficult to find sort of the projects we're interested in are all vast. And so that it's more difficult to find these sort of small chunk size software projects that would fit with a volunteer. I'm not sure if I've answered that question. I'm sort of slightly thinking on my feet on this one.
It's tricky, isn't it? And I mean, even, you know, just in terms of software development projects, we're trying as hard as possible to engage our colleagues in Kenya who work with us in Nairobi and developing and fostering that growing industry. So that's another thing. We have key partners overseas, software developers, but also we want to really use local Kenyans to help us with our software solutions. And there's a growing industry in Kenya and in Africa, which is exciting. So, and we're hoping to see some innovations coming from within the continent for new ideas and fresh ideas for how to connect software and apps with conservation.
Yeah, that said, always happy to talk it through, because I think we haven't fully explored this area, and you know, it's kind of something we've dabbled with, and then we see these problems and we back off a bit, and that's probably the experience that the questioners had.
Well, thanks so much, Chris and Lucy. I know that you guys have to run to your next CITES meeting, which is really important, and we weren't able to get to all
discussing the toolbox with the director of wildlife for Ghana, which is one of the very few African range states that we don't have a project in. So
that's so exciting. We want to hear all about the updates that come out of CITES, and we appreciate you guys so much for not just all of the work that you do with elephants, obviously, but for taking the time out of a really busy schedule to be able to share your work with us today. We also want to send a big thank you to our audience. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question, please email Megan. She's put her email in the chat. We'll make sure that we get some answers for you. Thanks to generous contributions to the Elephant Conservation Fund from individuals like you, we've been able to make those grants of $31 million for elephant conservation. If you'd like to contribute to Elephant Crisis Fund, please visit our website. I believe we also have that linked in the chat. There's no contribution too large or too small. And then just to close out the session, we do have an announcement for our next Closer Look. If you guys would like to come and join us, it is on Friday, December 16th at 12 p.m. Pacific time, and it's going to be covering the state of WCN. So you'll be able to hear updates from the past year and learn about what's up and coming in the future for WCN from our CEO, Dr. Jijay Kolom, and you can register with the link in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you so much, Lucy and Chris. Look forward to hearing everything that comes out of CITES.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day as well. We really appreciate your interest in elephants. And just, yeah, we need so much help. So every single one of you that's helping us, thank you. And please don't give up. We're out here on the front line doing our best, but you guys are also helping us from wherever you are. And welcome to everyone who is on the call from our colleagues across the African range states. We might see you in the committee next door. Okay, bye for now.
Cheers.